So that ball comes into you and it's...
Yeah, like high performance, high pressure, like that's all an industry, right? Because I lived in a state of pain. I was told that I would never, ever play without pain. And to hear that as a teenager, it's like, what? So that same habituation, which cigarettes and which alcohol drove into consumerism, how do we begin to drive that from a healthy perspective and drive healthy habits into society? If you're looking to achieve success, if you're looking to win the Premier League, you're going to need to invest. If we went into an economic disaster, Tottenham might be the one of 8 clubs who get through that. It is a level of discipline that the typical fan, the typical punter watching the game would never be able to conceive in their mind. It is a ruthless industry, it's not normal, but it is the most boring profession you could ever think of.
Really? Yeah, cool. 3, 2, 1, go. Let's have some fun. Thomas, thanks for so much for doing this, mate. Super excited. What I would love to start with is one of my favourite books of all time. It's called The Obstacle is the Way by Ryan Holiday. It's a book about applying stoicism to life, turning adversity into opportunity. I feel like after doing some exploration of your backstory with the Turmeric Co, it feels like you had more adversity than most people would understand from first glance. The 2 ACL injuries, the being dropped from Arsenal at 15. I think I read somewhere you were crying yourself to sleep at night at 16, 17 years old. Take me into that period of your life at such a young, formative age to go through that adversity. What did that feel like? And then what are the principles you used to sort of turn adversity into obstacles into opportunities today?
Yeah, good question to kick things off.
Yeah, cheers, mate.
Really nice. So I think when you look at society in general, and I've got kids now, and you basically don't realise that adversity and suffering is actually really important in terms of your development, and that's both from a psychological perspective, from a resilience perspective. Like the only way that you can genuinely overcome challenges is if you have faced that level of restriction and that level of barrier to progress before. And that's why when you talk about stoicism, it's almost like you're trying to like precondition the mind into how you would actually approach adversity. But the reality is, until you face it, you don't really know how you're going to get through it. And even when you are facing it, like it's only once you've come through a true adversity that you realize that actually, all is mind, and you can actually overcome a lot of the challenges that you perceive as challenges simply via perseverance and through maintaining a level of faith and a level of knowing. It's always difficult with these types of things because you always end up going down into, you sort of get pigeoned into whether it's, religion or a, practice that you should therefore follow. It's like, well, no, it's actually just, being content and having an internal knowledge that the path that you are on is right for you. And so to sort of answer your question, I think that initial, framing it in that way where actually the world that we live in prevents a lot of people from experiencing true adversity and pain, simply because, you want to give a good life to those who are around you, and, you want to, you don't want to see suffering, you don't want to see pain, why would you? But actually it's an important part to forming your character and being able to, understand what is truly of purpose in the world, and therefore in your life. So I think me personally, I was able to go through adversity at that moment in time because I had a clear vision and a clear want, a clear, need. Like I wanted.
I was going to say, like, how? Because at such a tender age of like 14, 15, I mean, I was still fucking skateboarding at that age, you know what I mean? Like, how did you have unwavering self-belief when the waves of self-doubt and adversity were coming through? Because I feel like most kids, like I think you even said on a podcast, like out of everyone in that Arsenal group you were with, I think one other than you made it. Like, what was different in your nut versus those other kids? Because you had more adversity. Like, what were you, when you're crying, you wake up in the morning, you look at yourself in the mirror, what are you saying to yourself? Because I think this will help a lot of people.
Yeah. So firstly, it's not unwavering. Like you are constantly in doubt. So it's always easy when you achieve something and when you look back and you're like, oh yeah, I was so tough during that period. I was just able to get through it. And it's like, well, no, there was constant self-doubt, constant uncertainty, constant unknowing. But the challenge that you have to overcome is how do you live within that? So actually you're all of a sudden you're like, oh yeah, came through those 2 injuries, came through being released by Arsenal, came through nearly getting released by Reading because simply couldn't get fit, and managed to find a blend which completely changed my life and changed my perception on, nutrition, health and wellness, all the way down to the root core of pharmaceuticals. And actually, why are we living in pain today in this day and age? Well, actually, do we need to? Like, in my opinion, no, we don't. And I think there are solutions out there. But it's like, if you wind all of that back, you go back to, actually, it's not about overcoming. It's about like becoming within that state. So you are you have a level of acceptance of the complete uncertainty and the complete opportunity for failure at any given time. And so that is the hardest place to live in, because
so it's like almost like it's almost like surrendering to the fragility and the self-doubt, but still taking action.
Yeah, essentially. Like it's being willing to like accept that you are not in control.
Yeah.
And that what you're looking to achieve and what you are, dreaming and aspiring of completing, like, may never come to fruition. But are you still going to be willing to wake up and take that step forward again? And so I think that's like, when I look back now, why was I able to overcome what I was able to overcome? And look, a lot of people overcome a lot worse than what I had gone through. But actually, what I was going through was a traumatic experience, did scar me, to my core in, real pivotal parts of a child's upbringing. And so when I look back now, it's like, yeah, it is the fact that I was just willing to continue to persevere and be within that state, that state of uncertainty, that state of unknowing, that ultimately allowed me the opportunity to eventually come through it.
And would you say that's in a parallel world in business, it's the same thing?
Yeah, I would say in all states of adversity, and that's my point. Like, where in the world that we live in today, like, adversity is, it's almost like shunned. It's like hidden away from you. It's almost like we're scared of adversity. We're scared of challenge. We're scared of confrontation. We're scared of pain. And it's like, well, no, like, these are, when you're experiencing those types of things, like, they are genuinely formative experiences which help shape you to create a better future and a better, environment and outcome. And, I think for me, like, that's why I look back now and, I'm so passionate about what we're doing with the Turmeric Co, because I lived in a state of pain. I was told that I would never, ever play without pain. I was always going to live with pain. And to hear that as a teenager, it's like, what is going? It's insane, And so that drove me to finding a solution of natural nutrition, like food as genuine medicine. It's better than medicine because you don't get the side effects, right? So then that, for me, is why, again, I'm so passionate about what we're doing, because actually, do we need to live in a state of physical pain when there are preventative measures out there? So, yeah, I think if you're able to go through circumstances and persevere through situations, then, typically on the other side, you tend to experience some form of value, which you can then decide to take forward or not.
What would be, because Chris Williamson's a podcast I love, he's got this thing called 2D versus 3D lessons. So 2D lessons are something you could read it in a book, right? But until you actually go through it in a 3D situation, i.e., you know, so whether it is a breaking an injury or heartbreak, like you can't, if you've been with someone that you've loved and you've gone through heartbreak, you can't, no matter how many fucking books you read about that, until you actually experience it and it's sort of baked into your soul, can you actually extract any of the lessons? What are some of the positive lessons you've taken from adversity?
From adversity, I would say, I would say similar to what I've covered there, like being willing to sit with yourself. I think a lot of people don't like adversity or challenge. Look, factually, we are, as a civilization, like, we do not like change. So that's like a fact, right? So because change basically creates the unknown, and the unknown basically creates risk. And when you begin to sort of go back to, you know, survival modes, like that increase in risk was actually a risk to life. So we're like innately conditioned to not like change, right? So I think, but the only thing that you can guarantee in the world and in someone's life is change. So therefore, it's like, how do you begin to, like, psychologically prepare yourself for living in a state of constant change? And now that doesn't mean that you're constantly, you know, fucking shit up and trying to, like, cause a storm all at a time. But it's like saying, well, look, like, actually, I'm willing to accept change at any given time in any given circumstance, and be willing to persevere and accept it and then develop off the back of it, because that's ultimately how you evolve. So evolution, again, is driven by change of environment, change of outcome, so then when you begin to wind all of that back, you kind of begin to realize that actually change is a really important aspect of life. So how you approach change ultimately begins to dictate the outcome you get from change. And if change is happening all of the time, then you could almost argue that actually that outcome is the outcome of your life. So if you're...
What's the good way to approach change? What's the bad way to approach change?
So the good way to approach change is, like, in a state of gratitude, in a state of acceptance, in a state of, abundance. It's like for every messed up situation, there is always an element of opportunity within that, always. And it's just whether or not you, within the state that you're in, are able to or willing to see that. The way that you shouldn't approach change is from a sense of lack, from a sense of fear, from a sense of insecurity, because all of a sudden now you are essentially pre-programming yourself to prepare for all of that as an outcome of it. So I think, like, for me personally, like, the experiences that I went through, it was really around how do you always identify and be accepting of change, but also, like, really leverage that to almost be a catalyst for opportunity and a catalyst for success. And so, but from a very, very young age, like, I would almost approach every single state of adversity as a massive, massive opportunity. And that's just something that...
Mate, it's a beautiful, beautiful way of putting it. But I think the nuance that I've got from you, mate, is actually the kind of the anti-stoicism thing, which is stoicism. I think the issue with stoicism is it makes you think you shouldn't feel these things. It's like you should, any obstacle that happens to you, just be like this single-minded, like, unwavering thing. Well, actually, it's like, feel all that things, accept it, but still move forward and still be open to the opportunity within that. I love that. I want to talk about, you said I think it was like all culture starts from the top. I think you're talking about John Majeski at Reading. I'm a Spurs fan. And so after seeing yesterday's shit show, we got demolished by Arsenal 4-1, the stuff happening with Daniel Levy, and then equally, pulling this to Wales, like Welsh rugby at the minute is kind of in an interesting state where they used to be you want them to be competing. What have you learned from being in various cultures at various clubs, from top down, insights from the top down is the first part of that question. And then how do you implement them at Turmeric Co? Like some of those principles or lessons from sort of stadia to boardroom?
Yeah. Really interesting question. I think, firstly, there are nuances that you will never know. So it's like we always have like a perspective on every situation. You know, you mentioned, North London derby, Arsenal 4-1 versus Spurs, right? It's like your perspective on that is from a lens of a fan who's passionate about, Spurs, who's probably followed them, since as young as you can remember. And so when we have our perspectives on any situation, like you basically narrow the ability to see it in its complete form, or like in a complete holistic manner.
Sure.
And so like why I'm saying that to start things off is because there are nuances involved in the decision-making at Spurs, which is why the club is in the position that it is today. So they may have, for a period of time, tried to drive profit into the business. And that focus on profit might have limited the opportunity for them to invest into the club, invest into the team, invest into success. But actually, that focus has actually allowed the club to be relatively self-sufficient. So they are now stable. So actually, if in 5 or 6 or 10 years' time we went into a, economic disaster, Tottenham might be the one of 7 or 8 clubs who get through that, right? So it's just, I think when and why I'm saying this is like, and every single organization has these nuances and the decisions which are made for both good and bad, which not everyone can see all of the time. So I think really understanding, so my point is in a football club, like if you were to judge a football club, you would really need to understand like every nuance involved in that football club for the last, decade at a minimum, to really understand like where is it today, why is it in the state that it currently is, but also then what are the opportunities for it to be in a different state or in a progressive state in the future. And so, but my point is with those nuances, like typically they are always driven from the top down. So it's always typically the owners who are pulling the strings and making the decisions of the direction of the club, the nuances around the decisions made, and ultimately the outcome that club has. So one thing for me, like having stepped outside of football now over the last few years, like looking in completely impartial, like it is glaring to see when a club is successful or not successful as to why. And it is always because the ownership of that club have made a conscious decision to be successful.
What do you mean by conscious decision to be successful? As in surely every club in the Premier League is consciously trying to be successful. Like what's the difference between someone in like 18th versus like 6th in the league? Like, do you know what I'm saying? Do you see what I'm trying to say? Yeah.
Yeah. So, but again, that person, that club who's 18th versus the club who's 6th, that club who's 18th, where did they come from?
Okay, yeah.
They may have been in, League One 5 years ago.
Yeah.
There's great examples
Brighton
of that.
Or something like that. Yeah.
Fantastic. Brentford. Another example is, on the charge now, Wrexham. Like, brilliant, like Hollywood story, yes, but they made a conscious decision to be successful. And so what I mean by that is there was a clear level of intent, which was coupled with the resource to do so, to get there. So you have to, if you're looking to achieve success, if you're looking to win the Premier League, like you're going to need to invest into the infrastructure of that club, into the squad of that club, into the first team of that club to compete at any given level. And a great example is obviously Manchester City. When Manchester City first were taken over, they didn't immediately gain success, but what they did, they restructured the entire back end of the club. They invested into the facilities, into the back room, into the training ground, into their scouting system, into their recruitment process, into that. So they did all of that investment into the back end. And once that was in place, they then began to invest into the front end, the Kevin De Bruyne's, the Vincent Companies.
Yes.
So all of a sudden, so my point was, is if you were at Manchester City at that moment in time when they began to make that investment, that decision into success, you would have been like, "Ooh, yeah, this feels different. This is different." And again, another example right now is Newcastle. Although they've not had a great level of immediate success, they are a club who are now being invested in heavily. Like, they are showing levels of intent to be successful, right? And so you can then use that vice versa of clubs who maybe have been successful and then maybe have taken their foot off the gas, and they're not necessarily making a conscious decision to be successful. They're maybe relying on their laurels, resting on their laurels. They're relying on the existing club to take them forward for the next few years. Like, it's
the intention and nuance piece, which is super interesting. So like all from the top down, because as you said, on like sort of that zooming out 10,000 feet perspective, like every club where they are now is through. If you go through the weeds, there's a lot of nuanced decision making. When applying this to Turmeric Co and brand building, how have you, from top down, in real intention from the beginning and building those foundations? How have you thought about cultivating that? Not like, I mean, culture 1, 2, like sort of systems and anything you've taken sort of from training that apply to business, because I think they are, transferable. That first, and then second, like, what are some of those hard, nuanced decisions that have got you to where, because you guys you exited to what's this place called?
So we have significant investors in the business.
Okay,
now.
that was
AG
it.
Bar.
AG Bar, yeah. To get you to this stage, like what is that? Maybe start with kind of the intention, then we can go on to the nuance.
Yeah, so with the Turmeric Co, like, everything that we do is about the customer. So it's about the life transformations that our product range has on any person who consumes this range over time. So what that looks like is, well, actually, it's the impact our range has on the customer's health. And therefore, first and foremost, the product is everything. And so that's quite different to a lot of FMCG, startup CPG brands, because they'll talk to you about, like focusing in on, what's the category, what's the consumer, like what's the consumer demographic that you're targeting, like what's the brand, what's the messaging, so you do all of that brand building, but the product is very much tertiary, right? It's almost like, well, that product will come. Yeah, it will come, because for the majority of CPGs, like, they're effectively delivering Me Too products anyway. There's very little differentiation between the product that they bring to market versus other products that are on the shelf or other products that are in the category. And so for us, it was very much around, how do we bring that same high quality, functional, clinically backed turmeric blend that I was using at home by my father to market. And so we invested heavily in terms of product, and we were able to basically implement a process where we could scale our product process, that same quality, even improve the quality where at periods of times when we could. And by delivering that consistency and that uniqueness, we went as far to trademark specific processes, trademark specific blends that we put into our range, our Biomax uptake blend, our liposomal, lipoterm uptake mix. All of these were like us thinking like, well, this is very different to just a Me Too, shot that you can get from a Pret or a, M&S, and it's fine. Like, these are all really important because they're building the category and awareness of functional.
Yep.
But actually, ours was around the life transformations that our range could have.
So
on
that
people.
was your sort of, say that's your top, that's your North Star right at the beginning, and then everything sort of
So life transformation. So we're here to change people's lives. And then therefore it was like, well, how do we do that? So basically through the product, so product quality, product efficacy, product availability, price point. So we needed to invest heavily in terms of scale, being able to produce a high quality product at a high level without any restrictions, without any shortages. And then, after that, it was around how do we begin to get our product into people's hands where they are at a point where they're ready to accept an alternative to, maybe standard routines or, sort of standard medication, and so when you think about, say, for example, you have, everyone has habits in the world, right? But in consumer goods, you have habits which are driven by, say, cigarettes and alcohol, as an example, right? So our mission and what we're doing with the Turmeric is how do we actually begin to create healthy habits? So that same habituation, that same culture which cigarettes and which, which cigarettes and which alcohol drove into consumerism, how do we begin to drive that from a healthy perspective and drive healthy habits into society? And so that was a big portion of is constantly a big focus of ours. And then as you begin to layer all of that into that sort of objective, it's like, well, how do you begin to drive differentiation? So then it was the clinical research. So we invested into clinical research. We have a lead research scientist, we have a dietitian, we have a nutritionist. So building that out, we've published 5 clinical studies on our range so far. Like I don't know many pharmaceutical, brands, like supplement brands that have done that, let alone, sort of natural functional shop-based brands, right? And so that became a big focus of ours, and again allowed us to begin to differentiate the difference of us versus the sort of standard products on the market. And then from there, it was like, how do we now get the product into as many people's hands as possible? So we had to take all of that messaging, all of that journey, and begin to basically win shelf space from, sort of the standard products on the category and drive our message and our brand into those locations. And we've done that through building a relatively strong direct-to-consumer model, through subscription-based offerings. So that's been the non-stop journey of building what we're building. And like my point around like the intention, like we have intent to be successful, and success for us is the number of life transformations that we create in the world.
It's the intention thing is so fascinating. I was just in Nashville in America interviewing a guy called Will Goddard, amazing book actually, called Unreasonable Hospitality. And it's how he took this restaurant in New York called 11 Madison Park from 50th to best in the world. And it's like, ultimately, as much as it's a book about restaurants, it's actually a book about leadership and, and his whole thing is intention. And he says culture is when you give language to intention. That's what culture is, in his opinion. It's like when you have this intention, you give it language, that equals culture. And it's fascinating, like really getting into this intention thing. What was the intention? So when you were like prepping for a big game, like what did you learn about intention in, the week going up to a game? So I think that could be, looking at that cross section could be really fascinating.
Yeah, I think, you realize as an elite athlete, you realize that all is truly mind. So you can think things and it can become. So you have an opportunity in an environment where you can basically test that out and see if it's true, and you can find the results relatively quickly, and so that shifts your mindset completely, because then you begin to realize like the power of your mind, and we're so locked in existing bubbles and infrastructures where we perceive that our environment impacts our internal state, when it's actually our internal state which impacts our environment. And so that whole methodology, that whole approach to mind is still something which, for me, I genuinely don't know why that isn't taught in schools, because it is fact.
Do they have psychologists in these clubs who are teaching this stuff, or
no? Interesting. Unfortunately not. No, that'd be pretty cool. They should do 100%. I would say beyond elite sport, like this is approach to life. Like this is like, so I would say it's not about elite sport. This is about kids in the playground. Like, what are they when they are in their most creative state? When they are in a state of abundance, a state of love, like they are creating their worlds. And for whatever reason, because there's obviously reasons out there, as you grow and as you get older and as you move into the infrastructure of the world that we live in, these begin to get chopped away and you begin to get, almost like stunted.
Oh mate, this is my biggest thing is this. Like we do these talks about creativity we go into brands.
Yeah.
And it's like it all started with the Industrial Revolution. Is that once that happened, we started moving the real school education system came out the Industrial Revolution in the sort of late 1700s, early Victorian age, and we were basically training kids to be factory workers. And it's like, if I've got little cousins, like they fucking play Lego, like they play, and then as soon as you go through the school system, you'll sort of just come out, and you hear these people go, "I'm not creative," and I'm like, "Well, did you play Lego? Did you go outside and run around the garden? Well, then you're creative." Do you know what I mean? It's so interesting. I find it how does creativity, because you were saying it's all of mind or mind of all or whatever it was. Like, let's talk about that goal. I think in the 2016, was it semi-finals or
quarterfinals?
Quarterfinals. So that ball comes into you, and I'll get it up on the screen for people watching on YouTube. But essentially, is it Ramsey who crosses the ball into you?
Yeah.
And it's this, like got 2 or 3 players around you. It's like would you say that energy is coming from, say, intent, instinct, creativity? Like, what is going on in that? If we were to try and slow down that moment, slow it down, like where's that all coming from, do you believe?
Yeah.
It's quite a deep question, sorry, but
I
think it's interesting.
Yeah. No, it is really interesting. But you'd also see like any performers playing at their highest level of performance and giving their highest level of performance are in that state. And it's been, there's different, approaches to it. And there's obviously like flow state, and that's been sort of like, sort of coined, and it's like, get into your flow state. But it's a bit, I struggle with as they try and put things into a box and describe it, because it's more than that. And it's not one thing, it's a multitude of various different factors. So in that instance, that is a complete, state of freedom where at that moment in time, everyone on the pitch, every one of my teammates, every one of the coaching staff, everyone watching the television was saying, okay, well, now it's time to set that ball off to, it was Neil Taylor who was running into space. And so that's where even the opposition are telling me it's now time to lay that ball off. That's why there was so much momentum going in one direction. But because I was in a state of freedom, a state of creativity, like you said, that ability to play, my decision was actually, well, no, I think there's space this way. So I'm going to basically make a decision to shift my body weight, do a turn, which everyone else was not expecting. And that's what created the space that allowed me to score that goal, which then, sort of became a viral sensation, a moment in time for my career, for our nation as Wales, and, for the home nations in that tournament. It was a very special moment. So, I think that ability to, when you're performing, you are in a state of freedom. And that, again, sort of ties back to what I was earlier, trying to describe and explain in around, when you're in a state of freedom, like you are very much accepting of where you are, and regardless of whether you're facing adversity or whether you're, facing triumph, or in that state, like just being is the key. But
how does high pressure equal freedom, would you say?
Yeah. So, and again, I think this is really fascinating, because again, high pressure has definitely been coined in terms of high pressure, high performance. It's almost like, you need to get into a state of high performance and high pressure. And it's like, well, okay, yes, there are moments in time when you will experience that, but actually it's that ability to, to really understand, like, what is it that you're trying to achieve? Like, what are you trying to do? Because in any form of high pressure or high performance moment, you're typically trying to do something. And therefore, when you have a level of high pressure or high performance around that, again, you're creating this preconceived perception, which might be perceived, it might be a real life, a penalty in the last, minute of a FA Cup final, right? That is a real moment which is happening. But when you begin to break it down, you are kicking a ball against a opponent inside of a box to try and get it into a net. So my point here is that regardless of any high performance, high pressure moment, you basically, to deliver high performance, it's basically maintaining a focus on what it is that you're actually there to do.
Wow. I mean, this will help so many people with, you know, who go into a Tesco's pitch or go into an investors meeting, because bulk of our audience are brand, you know, builders and stuff. But I think it is, I used to work for a peanut butter brand called Manny Life. I don't know if you've seen those guys. And the sales director at the time goes, we're just selling peanut butter. And it would just take away all the pressure. The pressure of like, we need to, what's the rate of sale doing? You know, all these things that kind of out of your control. But actually, one of the ways to sort of just calm the ship was like, we're just selling peanut butter. And it just kind of made everything, you know, we're just trying to put a ball in, we're in a box, trying to put the ball in this, you know, square thing, or square, like rectangle thing, and hit it back. Yeah. Interesting. That's fucking so interesting, man.
So then it begins to, you begin to break down the layers and the preconceived ideas. And I think a lot, look, like high performance, high pressure, like that's all an industry, right? And to be like, it's, what I mean by it's an industry is it has been built into an industry.
Yes.
Like people, if I can coach you on how to be a high performer and drive results every single day and lead a team and drive, like there's a commercialization element to it, right? So it makes sense that therefore that has been commoditized to a degree. But my point there is, all of that is all just noise. It always falls back to the fundamentals of what you're doing. And the fundamentals of what you're doing, there may be a blueprint for doing it. So there may be a way, as an example, to enter into a sales meeting with a Tesco's buyer and you're selling peanut butter, there may be a really good blueprint for you to follow, right? So if there is, then great. So just do that. So just focus on the fundamentals. But on the flip side, there also may not be a blueprint, which means that actually you have to, you know, cultivate some level of creativity. We get back to that state of, you know, being free. So you may need to be creative in that moment. But regardless of either way, there is never a right and never a wrong.
It's mad. So like the way I prep massive interviews, right? Or like when I started out, like, and because of now I've been doing it 6 years, I've got lots of experience, right? But initially I would do so much prep, right, which is kind of your blueprint thing. But then I found if I was being in the moment, like I'm with you now with an interview, like if I'm looking at my notes, it kind of is taking away from my freedom and my intuition and my instinct. So now I don't. I will prep, but then I'll just let it happen. And I feel like that's something I've learned, and this applies to anything. So even when we're going to go and sell sponsorship on this podcast, now I won't even have a sales deck. So it feels, I wouldn't go on a first date with an iPad. So it's but I love that idea of like, you know, being really following a blueprint if it's there, but also giving yourself the freedom just to be in that space, you know?
Yeah. So no, completely. And I think to that point around like high performance is like, so whenever you're thinking about performing or creating something or drive, like, it's just like, what are the fundamentals? Like what needs to be true for it to happen? Like if you can understand that, then that is typically like 95% of the work that you need to do. And then everything around that is either noise or might, you know, amplify or detract from the outcome to a degree. So actually just focus on the fundamentals all of the time.
Yeah.
All of the time.
Who's like one of the most underrated players you played with?
Underrated players, I would say, I'd probably say Joe Allen. I'd say like at one point in time, he was up there with the best players in the world. Like unbelievable, incredible. Like he would have made the Barcelona team better, which had, you know, Xavi, Iniesta and Busquets in it.
Yeah, mad. And then who was probably the least naturally gifted, who had to work harder?
I'd probably say myself.
Really?
Yeah, I'd probably say and look, that was as a pre-15, I was very talented. You know, I was my limitation was my physicality.
Yeah.
So I was a late developer. So I was the smallest in the squad, didn't have any muscle as a 15-year-old. And so, you know, I was always on the verge of sort of England and international youths, relatively skillful and, you know, great left foot and all of this great stuff. But then obviously got released because I was too small and wasn't physically strong enough. And then went through 2.5 years of surgery, which completely changed the way that I played. And so, yeah, like from that moment in time, like I was always facing an uphill battle to just get to a point of stasis, a point of parity of where I sort of felt
So what were you doing extra? Say you line up 100 academy players, like what were you doing extra? How are you prepping different to do that extra work?
I'd probably flip it down the other side. Like I'd say, what wasn't I doing extra? So,
interesting.
Yeah, so I was the first one at the training ground, last one to leave.
So I hate when people say that. I'm just asking some I'm following my curiosity here. So when they say that, so when you say first in, last out, does that mean you're basically shooting more goals? Like what are you actually doing when people say that? I don't understand.
It's a great question.
Yeah.
Really great question. So typically, well, for me, what I was doing when I was first one in, I would get in from around 6:15. And the only person who was there before me was Steve Coppell, who was the first team manager at the time.
Yeah.
And I would arrive at sort of 6:15. I would then have 10-15 minutes of getting ready to myself. I would then go from 6:30 into the gym, would do core for about half an hour. I would then at 7 o'clock, maybe go for a little bit of breakfast. You know, I'd probably have a bit of protein, some porridge, something relatively light. And then around 7:30, 7:45, I'd go onto the training pitch and I'll be doing extras from before the session.
Interesting.
I remember Steve Coppell used to say, like, who is that boy? Why is he always there by himself? He used to ask the academy manager. And I was, you know, sort of 16, 17, 17, 18 at the time as I began to get back playing. But that was in the mornings, and then afterwards I would then basically follow it. So follow that same routine, but I'd then bake in weights, and you would never do weights beforehand, particularly legs, because you need to train. But then I would finish with, you know, weights, extra runs, extra shooting. So yeah, so I was in a intense period to basically get back to, you know, a level where I felt I could compete, and yeah, eventually allowed me to break back into the first team. And, you know, but again, I would never have been able to have done that if I hadn't been so disciplined with my physical condition, because I would never have recovered from the surgeries and pain that I had. So
interesting. Yeah, no, because again, it's one of those things you hear people say, like first in, last out. What does that actually mean? What have you learned about sort of not necessarily leadership, but like planning and management from the training ground to business? Like, what would...
Yeah, really good question.
Yeah,
I would say again, it's that intent. So a lot of the time, when you talk about management and ownership, like where is, like, if you think an organization or business, it is basically a collective group of people.
Sure.
That's all it is.
Yeah.
Right, and you layer it in, and you put an email address on, and you put a website, you put some product in. But effectively, it is a group of people. So as managers and as owners of a business, your focus and your energy is basically around supporting the direction of that energy.
Direction of that energy. That's such a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah.
Because, like, you imagine, like, people, and this is where, and this is not easy, because every single person wakes up and is individual to them. Like, they have their own wants, their own desires, their own needs, like every single person in an organization. So how do you make sure that when everyone arrives at a single point, whether that's 9 a.m., 8 a.m. on a Monday morning, or, you know, team meeting at midday on a Wednesday afternoon, how do you make sure that everyone's energy is constantly pointed towards a single direction and a single objective and outcome. And I think that is, so again, it's like when you look at football and you look at, sports, that's relatively, it's easier to do because you arrive at 3 p.m. on a Saturday afternoon and it's showtime. It's game time. You're either ready or you're not. So you have to be ready for that. And if you're not ready, as a member of that collective, that member of that energetic field, that group of individuals, if you're not ready, it will stick out like a sore thumb, because you won't perform. You'll miss up the opportunities, be booed off at halftime, whatever it is. So, but that's so important because that's where you begin to get that focus and that results, and you begin to drive traction into an organization or into a team or into a plan for the year or a project for the year. So when you begin to, so in sports, you have that, there is a jump off point where you need to be ready to perform. When you talk about business, it can be more subjective. It can be like, oh, how are you feeling today? Are you showing up today, etc. So how do you bring that focus and that intent into an organization and have clarity on direction of the collectives within that group or within that organization all of the time?
Would you say is easier, football or business?
I would say it will define easier. In what sense?
Well, maybe different's a better way of saying it. In the sense that, because on the one hand, you've got the high pressure of football, right? Literally 0.01% of people actually make it. You've got the pressure of everyone watching you on TV. You've got the pressure of fighting for your place. But on the other side of it is, you rock up to training and you've got to be there, and then there's this session, there's that session, and then as you say, bang, 3 p.m. on a Saturday, it's showtime. So that's probably football. With business, it's like maybe the pressures are still high, but not as excruciatingly high. But then in business, it's slightly different because people may come in on a Monday, but they may be going through a divorce. They may have, I know you get these things in football as well, but I suppose it's different types of pressure. The nuance of pressure. Like one's like, it's showtime. The other's more of a, Danny Mayer's got a quote, which is slow, gentle pressure. He's a great restaurateur, but again, he created Shake Shack. But I feel like maybe business is more slow, gentle pressure. Football's like, I don't know. But that's my thing. You pick holes in that. Yeah, no,
I think ultimately, like, and if we refer to high performance, it's like how do you drive high performance into a business at any given time? It's basically being exceptional at the fundamentals. So just get those fundamentals right, get exceptional people doing them all of the time, and that is what will drive performance and outcomes within a business. Within sport, within football, there's obviously a lot of variables, and you need to get the best players and the best groups. And obviously myself, I was a player within the football club. And would I have gone into management? Yeah, potentially. But at the same time, what we're doing now, for me, is so much more rewarding because every time we impact a person positively, not only do we make them feel great, on a Saturday, if you win the game, you make 60,000 people feel amazing, right? But actually, with what we're doing now with the Turmeric Curve, we impact someone's life positively, like we've actually changed the health of their life. So we've given them back their freedom, beyond the emotional state of performance or sport. So this for me is a lot more purpose driven and a lot more rewarding because, if we can transform the lives of, we've had over 20,000 life-changing testimonials. If we can get to 1 million life-changing testimonials, we would have shifted the course of society in a meaningful direction. So actually I feel a lot more rewarded, doing what I'm doing now.
It's so interesting. What do most people misunderstand about footballers, football? Like almost like what's boring in your week? Like, and because I feel like there's in doing anything great, there's an element of monotony, and I think, at least from the public perspective, is obviously they get paid loads of dough. Like, what's the hard stuff that people don't really understand? Do you know what I mean?
It is the most boring profession you could ever think of.
Really?
Yeah. It's massively boring. Like, you wake up, by yourself. You know, you get to training ground by yourself. You are like criticized and you are judged as an independent. Like yes, you're part of a team, but you are always in isolation at all times. Like that's one thing which sport, and again, it's the same for business and things, but it is just amplified to the nth degree because of the profile in which you operate, because of the adulation, because of the fan base, because of the media, because of everything. Like so, but with that level of responsibility of how you actually show up day in and day out is so boring. Like us, Haaland now, like his life is so boring. Yes, he has phenomenal, opportunities and freedom in certain circumstances, that 3.5 week window a year where he can go on holiday, that he can go wherever he wants, right?
Yeah.
He can't do whatever he wants, so again, there's restriction in that. So all of a sudden it's like, okay, well then what about for the other 52 weeks of the year? Like, what 50 weeks, what's actually happening there? Like, it is boring, it is monotonous, it is a level of discipline that the typical fan, the typical punter watching the game would never be able to conceive in their mind.
How what's the level of discipline like? How so more than like? As in, is it like? Okay, so for example, like the baseline of people's version of discipline in say society is someone who's a marathon runner, right?
Yeah,
that's pretty good discipline, right? Because you've got to do at least 3 runs a week. Long ones, probably watch what you're eating, what you're drinking. If that's that level of discipline, what's the football? What's the difference? Do you see what I mean? Is it like?
Yeah, I would say by the time a footballer has got to any level of note, they have had to have shown a level of discipline for 10 to 15 years, day in and day out.
It's the time. Okay.
Yeah. So they would have been doing this from young. They would have missed the school parties. They would have, missed going to a school friends on the weekend. They would have left school early to get to training ground. They would have got home super late. They would have faced disappointment and self-doubt and adversity well before the typical person, because the pressures involved in being in an academy system or, being at, Arsenal as a 10 or 11-year-old, all of a sudden you're getting judged to a point where if you are not good enough, you will be let go in the blink of an eye at 15 and told that that's the end of your career.
Yeah, so it's almost like you're almost like your own business within a business, essentially. What's it like from the perspective of a substitute that's trying to break into the team? Are you watching that when you're watching that game, are you thinking like, that player's in my place, or like, I want the team to win? Like, what's the honest perspective on that?
Yeah, it's a really good question. I would say, and you don't need to like limit it to substitutes. In football, you mentioned, business within a business. Like you are competing all of the time. Every time you walk on the training pitch, you are competing against your teammates. Every time you play an 11v11, like you are competing against your goalkeeper because you want to score against your goalkeeper. Like if you score against your goalkeeper, even if he makes a mistake and you get a goal, like you're more likely to play on the weekend. But then on the weekend, obviously, you're in a team. So then that 11, that collective unity of 11 players is now versus the opposition of 11. And you need that 11 to be giving their best for 90 minutes. And so, yes, that means you come together. But if your right back is fucking shit up, like you're not like, oh, don't worry about it. You're like, get him off the pitch. And it's that level of, it's that mentality. It is a ruthless industry. And that's why I do say it's like one of the most ruthless industries I've ever come across. It's not normal. I think athletes who play in it for a sustained period of time, they are programmed completely differently. But it is, it's not too dissimilar to the majority of, real high intense environments, but it's just how willing you're willing to live within that.
Yeah, no, it's but also I think the bit that the nuance I've picked up from you, mate, is that you're actually you're almost like your own business within the team, which is kind of this, because as you say, it's like you're criticised if you're shit, you're off the pitch. Who talk to me quickly about Gary Speed? Sum up his wisdom in a sentence, because I know we're conscious of time, but like he was very formidable in sorting Wales out. Like, what was his? Why was he so good?
Yeah, he just brought in the standard of elite performance, which is get the foundations absolutely nailed and do them the very best way you can possibly do them. He just brought that in, and that's what he did. So whether it was our food, our training, our bottles and balls, like the basics were just immaculate, and that shifted the mentality. A lot of us were used to that at club level, but when you came to international, it was almost like, yeah, okay, you're just here to, turn up. Whereas he changed that culture, and he was fundamental, pivotal in that shift in Wales as a nation, and so that's the level of intention, right? I was
going to say, so right? That's it. So that's the intention.
Correct.
And what would you like in terms of rousing team talks, like when everything's your back's against the wall, you're 2-0 down, whatever. Like in those moments of pressure, it's almost like having intention and creativity and pressure. Like, is there like a specific moment you were like backs against the wall as a team and you've had a really motivating halftime talk? Like, what actually happens at those halftime talks? Do you know what I'm saying? Because we did and then what have you learned? How have you applied that to Turmeric? Because I'm sure there's been moments when your back's been against the wall and you've had to just fucking come out swinging. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. No, I think it's an interesting analogy. What I would say is that in all of the team talks that I've been in and all of the moments in time where you have needed that something extra, that whether it's coming in at halftime and you're like, okay, we need to give something more than we've been able to give. It's never been around that 5 to 10, 15-minute team talk. It's been about the fundamentals that you've done over the last 6 weeks, 12 weeks, 6 months, 12 months. And actually and all you actually need, the most powerful moments in time have been like when you've been in that situation and someone's just said, remember what we've done to get here. That for me, like, is actually the truth, because it's the foundations that you've done. Like, it's not what you're going to do now. It's what you have already done to get yourself into the position you're in. And so with the Turmeric Co, like what we have already done, the adversity that we've faced, the criticism to try and build a truly efficacy-based brand in a space which is full of noise, full of apple juice, full of orange juice, full of like products that aren't really here to make a difference. Like, it's the work that we have already done to get here, which allows the team to keep turning up every day and keep delivering.
What about like changing tactics and strategy? So again, pitch to boardroom is you may have, football is easy. Like if you're getting absolutely battered, like you'll make a few changes. But in business, like I think there's two sides. One, it's either being super stringent on what's going on, but it also being adaptive to what's ahead of you and being actually, we might need to change things. Like, what have you learned about those two spheres? Yeah. Because like, I suppose in football, they always like say like, well, you listen to Gary Neville, I've never played football, but it's like, just stick to the game plan, go back to the fundamentals, blah, 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 blah. But then at the same time, if it's not working, you need to change. But like, it's not easy that, do you know what I mean?
Yeah, of course. No, it's not. And I think in that instance, I'd say that's the freedom and the creativity. Like if you lose that freedom and creativity, you're not able to change strategy and change approach, right? So it's like, actually all it is, look, you're trying to get to an outcome. You're looking to achieve a goal, right? I'm following this path to get here. All you're saying is there anything that I could do differently than what I'm typically doing? Or is there a different route that I could take that would get me there quicker or get me there with less friction or in a more elevated state, whatever it is. Like, and so that level of creativity and freedom is when you can change strategy or tactics to incorporate ideas that might support that. But it's not, it's nothing out of the blue. You're not reinventing the wheel ever. And that's why, the likes of the great, tacticians over the years, like Pep Guardiola and all of these, managers who came, and even Arsene Wenger when he came in, it was like they had the freedom and the creativity to to apply a different approach to get to the same outcome and objective.
So two more things. That's right. Yeah. So you were at Arsenal during the Invincible period, or Invincibles. What on that note about different and stuff? I know there's a lot about the standards, and like kind of bringing in that sort of professionalism, fitness. What was kind of either underrated or unseen, or something you could only really understand by being in and around, Highbury at that time amongst those players? Like, what was it about? Why were they in fucking Invincible? Like, what was the secret sauce? If you could say it on something, hang your hat on something.
Yeah, I would say they embodied invincibility before they won that title. So, and the example is so a great example is like they had an aura of invincibility before they even won. And so the most simple thing is at the training ground, and it wasn't necessarily Highbury, it was the training ground where it all started. You arrived at the training ground and it was immaculate. When you walk into somewhere, an office or a courtyard or a car park, and there's litter on the ground, and there's things are just not quite where you would typically think they should be. Like it's that care for quality and attention to detail, which is almost like when you come into an environment which is immaculate, which is invincible, you feel it. So actually, like creating that environment, that was just, if you drived into Shenley, which was Arsenal's training ground, the years building up to the Invincibles, you would have seen a shift in the culture of the club and the culture of the environment in that club. And that was the basic. So again, it's nothing new, it's nothing out of the box. It is just an obsession with the fundamentals, the foundations, which actually just have compounding knock-on effects to all areas. So that's what it was like walking in. Imagine what it was like in the kitchens, in the changing room.
But at the time...
Imagine what it was like on the training pitch.
What was it like?
So immaculate. So boom, 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 boom. This is planned. Everything. It was just like military operations constantly.
Wow.
So, and it was that, and there was areas to then have freedom, areas to be disciplined, areas to, drive focus. So it's not anything. There's nothing magical happening. It's just a relentless obsession with the foundational basics of any industry.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Final question. What's one truth you believe most people would disagree with you on?
All is mind.
All is mind. And that's what you can control anything, essentially.
Well, not control. You can control whatever you choose to control.
Right.
All is mind. So you can control whatever you choose to control.
Yeah. Mate, that's been an absolute joy. I really appreciate that, man. That was so much fun.
Cheers.
So we had to keep it short. Like, I could have gone on.
Yeah. Well, we'll set ourselves up.
Yeah, we'll get a part 2. But mate, that was great. Like, I got so many insights I've never heard before.
No, it was. I appreciate it. Thank you. It's good the way you approach